Thank you for your service. You're fired. How the U.S. military is cutting staff by giving out pink slips on the battlefield. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. Losing your job is hard. Finding out about it when you're in a war zone is something else altogether. Tonight, correspondent Leland Vitter tells us that is just what is happening, and there are more to come for America's heroes.
In combat, every second counts. Every ounce of energy is needed for staying alive. Fox News has learned that many soldiers currently and formerly serving on the front lines in Afghanistan were risking their lives while fearing for their jobs as part of the Pentagon plan to drastically reduce the size of the Army. These decisions were even delivered to officers while deployed, effectively firing them while in harm's way.
It puts the soldier's family and the soldiers under his command at risk. It creates an environment, if you will, inside of a unit where young officers look at each other and they ask themselves, who's next? Take Army Captain Luke Bouchatz, went to Afghanistan, survived, came home, only to face a layoff review board.
The Army is not just a career. It's not just a vocation for people who decide to stay in for a long time. It's a lifestyle. And to say, I'm sorry, we don't need you anymore, feels like it's unfair. It feels like betrayal.
The Army told Fox News 2,600 captains and other officers have or will be laid off. Bouchatz survived the cuts. Many of his friends did not and will not, as the Army goes from 520,000 soldiers to 450,000. Many of those combat veterans, some knowing they're under review and given pink slips while overseas.
When other people who are sitting on your right hand and your left hand start getting those pink slips, it feels like, well, maybe I am next.
In a similar move, the Army unceremoniously chopped thousands of young officers after the Vietnam War. Retired Major General Bob Scales lived through it.
It took decades, number one, for the individuals to recover, but most importantly for the Army to recover, because there was this sense in the early 70s of this broken covenant.
The Army now blames sequestration. Senator Jim Inhofe issued a statement saying our military's readiness and warfighting capability are clearly not the priorities of this president.
Just take a look at the Middle East, and somebody please tell me that we won't need these men and women again pretty soon.
When asked about these cuts today, the Army said, quote, the Army's drawdown plan is a balanced approach that maintains readiness while trying to minimize turbulence within the officer corps.
And this isn't the end of the cuts. There are more layoff review boards to come for soldiers overseas and here at home. Those let go face daunting statistics, an unemployment rate a full percentage above their peers. And as one observer told me today, Bret, now is not exactly the time one wants to be counting on the VA for anything.
Yeah. Leland, thank you, and welcome to Washington.
Good to be here.
Do you think the Pentagon is handling the issue appropriately? Let me know at facebook.com/BretBaierSR. or on Twitter at Bret Baier. You can use the hashtag Special Report. President Obama tried to shift the focus today to the economy and small business, hosting a White House event. But his critics continue to give him the business over immigration and the increasing crisis along the southern border. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry reports it was up to the president's advisors to play defense today.
Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson was near the southern border in New Mexico today with a message for illegal immigrants.
We intend to send you back consistent with our laws, and we are building additional capability to do that quicker and safely.
Well, President Obama decided against getting an up-close look at the crisis while he was in Texas this week. Johnson visited an ad hoc detention facility for women and children fleeing Central America and warned Republicans if they don't pass the $3.7 billion request, illegal immigrants could be released to families while waiting for deportation hearings because the beds in this facility are filling up so fast.
It has a capacity of up to 700 Currently, there's a population of a little over 400 here.
Republican John McCain shot back the budget request is stalled because it does little to halt the actual flow of kids to the border and will simply lead to a series of blank checks for new detention facilities.
We will not agree to the additional funds, the $3.7 billion, most of which is to care for these children and provide the facilities until we can assure the American people that it's going to stop. And unfortunately, that is not in the president's request.
White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest expressed confidence they'll get the money, even as he tried to explain the president's claim he did not go to the border because he's not interested in photo ops by suggesting not all photo ops are created equal.
When you prioritize photo ops ahead of solutions to actual problems, you're not really accomplishing very much. But when you are focused on problems and occasionally using photo ops to confront these problems, that's what real leadership is all about.
The Congressional Hispanic Caucus had its own photo op today, and Democrat Luis Gutierrez charged Republicans are exploiting kids for political gain.
I cannot understand what is not unique about these children today. I just don't get it. So leave the children out of it.
Republicans insist it was the president's executive order that put the kids in this position.
What a horrible thing to do to those kids and those families. Those kids are being exploited, injured, abused, killed. What a catastrophe. What a horrible thing to do to those families and those kids, Lou, to falsely encourage them to come into the United States.
The search for a solution is getting ever more desperate because officials say at this rate there will be 90,000 unaccompanied minors by September. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. For the second time in 2 days, a federal judge is ordering the IRS to provide information about lost emails from former official Lois Lerner. She, of course, is the bureaucrat at the center of the agency's targeting scandal. The IRS says Lerner's hard drive crashed, was recycled, and then presumably destroyed. The judge says he wants a sworn affidavit to that effect. Israel's prime minister says he will not let international pressure stop him from pressing forward with a broad military offensive in Gaza until rocket fire from Hamas has stopped. Also today, rockets came at Israel from Lebanon for the first time in the current fighting. Correspondent John Huddy has the latest from Gaza City tonight.
Another impact during yet another violent day of airstrikes and rocket fire. On day 4, the Israeli Air Force continued targeting what the Israeli military says are homes of suspected Hamas leaders, command centers, and tunnels.
This is where an airstrike happened this morning. You can see the extent of the damage, and people are trying to salvage whatever they can. The impact was so powerful that it even blew out the windows and caused damage in the other buildings.
It's not Hamas. There is no Hamas here. Only civilians are living here.
We're told the target here was a Hamas commander, but there's no way to confirm that. We're also told that the people here were given a warning to get out before the missile strike. So far, a reported 100 Palestinians have been killed. Many of them are civilians. Today, 5 family members were killed after Israeli jets targeted their house south of the Gaza Strip. An elderly man and a 5-year-old girl were among the victims. Israel blames Hamas for firing rockets from populated areas. Hamas continues to fire back. A rocket launched from the Gaza Strip hit a gas station in the city of Ashdod, seriously injuring 1 person. Meanwhile, Israeli officials say a ground offensive is still possible. Israeli forces are posted along the Gaza border, heavy artillery, armored personnel carriers, and tanks.
We are in the midst of an assault, and we are prepared to expand it as much as is required to wherever is required with whatever needed force.
Tonight, the airstrikes and rocket attacks continue here in Gaza. A U.S. or a UN representative told us earlier today that people are starting to, quote-unquote, panic buy. That means stocking up, hoarding certain items that are already in short supply here. We're talking about baby food, diapers, baby formula, and certain types of medications. All of this in anticipation of a possible ground attack. Brett?
John Huddy live in Gaza City early Saturday morning. John, thank you. Prime Minister Netanyahu will be Brit Hume's exclusive guest Sunday on Fox News Sunday. Brit is in for Chris Wallace this weekend. Check your local listings for times in your area. Up next, getting ready to sue the President of the United States, how the House prepares. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 59 in Indianapolis says a 3-year-old cancer patient is sworn in as America's youngest sheriff. Wyatt Schmaltz has been diagnosed with aggressive stage 4 neuroblastoma and has undergone several rounds of chemotherapy. Soon he'll have surgery to remove a tumor from his abdomen and will undergo a stem cell transplant. And now he's a sheriff as well. Q13 Fox in Seattle with efforts to control the 18,000-acre Mills Canyon fire. At last word, it had forced more than 100 mandatory evacuations. More than 450 firefighters are working that scene. And this is a live look, as you see a reporter getting ready for a live shot, at the estate of basketball superstar LeBron James in Akron, Ohio. From Fox 8. The big story all around Cleveland tonight, the chosen one is coming home. LeBron announced today he is leaving Miami, where he won 2 championships with the Miami Heat, and he's returning to the hometown Cavaliers. And it did not take long for blowback from Florida and for politics, of course, to come into play. In a new ad, LeBron is now compared to Republican-turned-Democratic gubernatorial candidate Charlie Crist on the left by incumbent Republican Rick Scott. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from